welcome to Stork'd, the podcast in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. This is your host, Julia, and I have a really special episode that is chock full of so many relatable moments. For starters, I am thrilled to be introducing this episode at the end of Pride Month, at the end of June. I'm talking to Christina Bailey, who has this huge platform on Instagram and social media, and she shares really openly about her life. And Christina's story has elements that should feel familiar to all of us. It has infertility journeys. It has finding love and recovering and healing from divorce. It's about getting back out there after a really rough blow to the heart. We're going to talk about wanting to continue your family and telling a new partner, hey, guess what? I'm going to go down a fertility journey. Are you with me? This is an experience I had. Christina's experience with it ended a little differently. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the battle that she had to get her embryos, because the legal world really just hasn't caught up to the way in which we're building our families. We know this from Jenna Jaffe's episode, where we learn about second parent adoption in the gay community. And one way it hasn't caught up is there's still a little bit of confusion over who gets embryos during a divorce. And that's true for gay or straight couples. Now, I want you to note that we don't get into this as much as we could because it's legal. We're talking about a legal battle that happened, and that's not really appropriate to share in the context of a podcast. So if you hear us skirting that issue or avoiding that topic, you understand the backdrop. There's something else that's missing from this story, and it's really important, and I encourage you to go check out Christina's social media site to check it out, and that is that we recorded this episode before Christina delivered her twins. She was 8 months pregnant, just about to deliver, and we knew that we were going to be launching this episode well after she had her babies. I think they're like 4 months now. What we didn't know, however, was that Christina was going to have a very, very scary delivery, and she ended up in the hospital for some period of time, and then so did her babies. And so she shares on social media very openly about the experience of having a difficult birth, a difficult delivery, and also the experience of being a NICU mom. None of that is covered here. It's a snapshot in time before all that happened, but I encourage you, if you're curious to hear more about Christina's story, to check her out on social media. There's another interesting detail about this episode. I usually don't give so many caveats, but there's a lot to share with this one, and that is that, I don't know, some technology glitch happened and my audio is not all that great. So I apologize in advance. It's a great listen. The content is amazing, even if the sound quality is less than the Stork'd standard. If you love this episode, and I am pretty sure you will, don't forget to share it with a friend. You never know who might be recovering from heartbreak and heartache, who needs to hear some of the wise words Christina has to share, or who wants to hear a little bit about a fertility journey. Please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, and don't forget to sign up for the Stork'd newsletter. We have some great content that we share. Thank you, and here is Christina.
Hello, welcome Christina to Stork'd, the podcast. This is the place in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. And I know from your story and from following you on social media, you've had to think about family building in a lot of different ways and sort of restart your journey a couple times. So I'm really excited to have you here to talk about all the things that you've done and where you are now. So welcome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's such an honor.
My name's Christina, and I am an elementary teacher. I've been teaching for, I believe, about 12 years, and I love it. I actually entered social media probably around, probably like 2015, around then when I started trying to create a family. I've been on it since. I did take about a year break recently with my divorce, but I'm back on with happy news of my pregnancy and continuing to grow my family, which has always been my dream. As far as being a teacher and other hobbies that I enjoy doing are photography, which I used to do full time until I had a baby, and then I realized I would rather just capture my family's moments. And I enjoy scrapbooking, traveling, being outside, crafting, any of those fun things.
Awesome. I think that's what makes you so relatable on social media, that you have this family life, you have these dreams, and you're so open about sharing them. I didn't appreciate that you were a photographer, and I can see it so vividly in the way you present your family life on social media. It's just so beautiful and elegant.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. There's this pocket of the online world where people like you are sharing all of their lives and experiences in a way that I think is really relatable. And so the rest of us can say, oh, wait, whatever they're going through, I've been through that too, or I think I'm going to go through that. And it's this like really generous service that some people choose to offer those of us who are exploring family building. What made you decide to open up your heart, your family, your life in this way to the general public to view?
I think that definitely started back in 2015 when I entered social media for the first time, besides, back at the teenage platforms that, we all used to go on. But I was looking for other families that I could see myself in, the way they created their family. I was looking for hope, especially after a failed egg retrieval. I wasn't really sure where to turn or what I should do next. So, going on social media, I was able to find families similar to the way I was hoping to see myself in a few years. And that is what kind of gave me hope. And I realized that after I had my first child and then my second child, that it would be great to help other families like they had helped me.
Oh, I love that. Let's go back to the beginning because you've now said you had this vision of other families that were sort of you're holding as like the faith for what you wanted to create for yourself. And you started by saying that you had this dream of a family. Would you mind articulating back when you closed your eyes, what did you see? What were you hoping for?
I was hoping for a big family, happily married, kind of falling into that happily ever after, and just making sure that everyone felt a part of making the family, which is why I lean towards reciprocal IVF. So that way everyone was feeling a part of how the family was created. And when I looked at other families that were created their family through reciprocal IVF, I really admired them. So that was the route that I had decided to take.
Got it. And we've had several people who've done reciprocal IVF on Stork'd. Just in case an audience member is new to the podcast, can you tell us what does that mean? What does it mean to include all members of the family, tactically, emotionally? What does the term mean? There's a lot built into that concept that you've just articulated.
Yes, definitely. And I think that over the years, my definition of maybe having everyone feel included has definitely changed. But back when I did first start my family, including everybody in meant having them be a part of the process of pregnancy, whatever that looked like. So with reciprocal IVF, you would use one woman's eggs fertilized by a donor sperm, and then those embryos would be transferred to your partner, and your partner would carry them. So that would mean that everyone was a part of the pregnancy in some way, whether it be genetically or carrying the babies and growing them. And then hopefully nobody would feel left out because unfortunately it's hard to create a family where both genetics are involved when it comes to a same sex family.
That's true. And I would never ask you to speak for somebody else, but did it come to fruition that you felt an equal part in the creation process as the person who carried?
I think that after going through reciprocal IVF and then being pregnant now, I would say that I don't think it matters who carries a child or how a child is brought into your family. I think that we spend a lot of time focusing on that, thinking about all the what ifs and all the worries. But once you're holding your child in your arms, however that child came into your family, I think the love is there. And it doesn't really matter how that child was brought in. So whether it be through pregnancy or adoption or any other route that you decide to take, I think that as long as you and whoever you're with, or maybe you're by yourself, as long as you have made that decision and you are emotionally ready for a child, I think the child will feel welcome and all the worries that you had will just disappear.
Oh my gosh, want to take that moment and just spread that message to so many people. Because one of the things that happens to me, and I'm sure it happens to you too, is that people sometimes reach out to me through the podcast of DMs, or they call me and they say, I want to talk to you personally about what's going on with me. I don't want it shared. And what often I get questions about is, if I use somebody's DNA, maybe I'm experiencing male factor infertility, or I'm a member of a same-sex couple, I'm worried that my partner will have a deeper connection to the child than I do, or I'm worried that I'll feel jealous of the relationship my partner has versus the relationship I have, or that I won't care enough. And what I'm hearing you say is that when you held your baby, none of that mattered.
Correct. Yes. I think that I spent so much time with creating the first part of my family with so many worries about myself, worries about my partner, worries about the children, that once the babies are here, you're so overwhelmed with just caring for a baby and making sure they live their best life that all those worries you had literally just lifted. And I think it really is about how you're feeling emotionally and mentally ready for this. So if you are leaning towards one way of you're very passionate about creating your family that way, I definitely think you should go for it and not try to push yourself a different way. But in the end, they're all just children looking for love from their parents, whoever those parents may be, but the child is just looking for love and you're looking to love a child.
Yeah, I like that. We're just all looking to love one another. If you were to have a conversation with your younger self when you were beginning your family building journey, what would you tell her?
Oh my goodness. Going to be a crazy ride. I definitely didn't. I mean, I speak about this a lot on social media that I definitely didn't imagine myself in the place I am now. Of course, when we start out young, we have this vision of just falling in love and having your happily ever after, you know, about two kids living in the suburbs, just pursuing your dream of things that you've watched on TV all these years and that family that you've always wanted, especially me coming from a family that was also divorced and my mom raised me primarily. So I had this vision of always having two parents in the house, always having the kids, traveling. And I did have that. So I was very happy. I was shocked by the divorce, but it also has given me a chance to look at a lot of self-growth. I've given myself time to just be alone. I was very happy to happen to find somebody, but I was also content with just being by myself too. And I think finding that place is really important for everybody. And not that I chose it, but since it did fall onto me, it actually was a good growth moment. So to my younger self, yeah, I would just say there's going to be a lot of ups and downs, but you are going to come out so much stronger and so much wiser than you ever thought you could be.
Let's hear the story a little bit with respect to your younger self and the journey that you went on. So it sounds to me like you had this clear sense, I'm going to be partnered. I'm going to have a happily ever after. The movie fairy tale ending, that's going to be mine. You find somebody, you fall in love, you decide to do a reciprocal IVF. And then it sounds like things got a little bumpy. Can you tell us a little bit about the bumps along the way and specifically how you navigated them? How did you support yourself and your family through the rocky period?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of rocky periods just in general with even trying to start my family. Even when I was married, there was a lot of ups and downs with trying to create my two children that I have now, but they both ended with two beautiful, healthy babies. So I could not be happier. So I realized that all the ups and downs were definitely worth it. When it came to being given divorce papers, I was, of course, very shocked. The overwhelming feelings just seemed to kind of take over. And it's really hard to explain, but it's been awesome connecting with other people who have been faced with similar situations, which is why I am very grateful for social media connecting me with all these other women who have been faced in same sex divorce situations as well. we all just talk about just having that overwhelming feeling of what do you do with all these emotions? We've all faced heartache in high school and, middle school, all those first loves that we thought were just amazing. But when it comes to a marriage ending, it really just feels like your life is falling apart and you don't know how you're going to bring yourself up from this. And especially if you have children involved, your thoughts immediately go to them of how are they going to feel now not having these parents together, and how are you going to deal with not being able to see your kids all the time when you used to wake up with them every day, and now you're going to have to deal with sharing them. So it's a day by day process for sure. If I could give anybody advice on it, I would just say you really just have to take it one day, sometimes 1 minute at a time. And I made sure to surround myself by family and friends because even though you feel alone with people around you, it's still better than actually being alone.
You're so right about that moment. And I think we can all relate to that moment when you are at your depths of despair. You can be in a crowded room with the people that love you most and you feel so desperately alone. And now I've gone through my breakup, so I can totally relate to those like moments of, God, my life just isn't on track. It's not what I had thought I would be, like, dealing with the surprise and the deep, deep, deep sadness. But at the time, I didn't have a kid. I didn't have to navigate both my emotions and support a child through a major transition, and in your case, 2 children. How did you work through the self-care and caring for others simultaneously?
Yes, that's definitely hard. I would say at the beginning, I leaned on my mom a lot, and she's also been very involved in my life anyway. So it was nice having her around to help out with me and my girls. It's hard because with kids around, not only do you have to go through a breakup, but they're also going through a breakup from their state of mind. So it's hard being faced with the questions of why isn't this person sitting here at the dinner table anymore? Or why isn't this person sleeping on this side of the bed anymore? Where are they? It was just little things like that where I was trying to hold myself together of not bursting into tears all the time and trying to find things to focus on, but also try to answer their questions in the most appropriate way. So I definitely leaned to looking at a lot of articles when I could bring myself to about helping kids get through this, and really just being very patient with myself and letting my kids express their feelings to me. And sometimes just them saying how they were feeling helped a lot. And at the time, my girls were 4 and 2. So the 4-year-old was definitely observing a lot more than the 2-year-old was. But it's hard also answering questions from a 4-year-old state of mind of why aren't my parents together anymore? Why are things different? Why are things changing? But it also did help having my mom there too. So we tried to just focus on other things. Like we would try to have other activities going on, but also answer their questions anytime it came up in the most appropriate way possible.
I was going to ask you, I was going to just comment that like those little questions, they it must be like a little dagger to your heart, right? Those are tough questions. They're tough questions when adults ask them. They're really hard when kids ask them. If I were to call you and say, Christina, it's happened. Like I'm devastated. We're no longer together. And I don't know how to navigate this. I don't know what to do. How do I put one foot in front of the other? You talk about it being minute by minute. Were there any tools or resources that you leaned on in those minutes?
I read quite a few books when I was going through like the really, really rocky path that kind of leads up to separation. So, and during those days, you kind of know what's coming because it's been talked about, but you're still kind of holding on to that piece of hope. Like maybe things will make it, maybe things will be okay. So during that time, I did spend a lot of time reading, and there was a quote by Glennon Doyle, which I really love her book, Untamed. And she talks about you can do hard things. I don't know how many times I had to repeat that to myself when I was trying to get out of bed in the morning, when especially my girls weren't there. And I would just repeat it to myself nonstop until I got out of bed. I took a shower. I tried to eat something. I just told myself, like, you have to do like those basic things. You have to, you have to get dressed. You have to put some type of food in your body. You have to drink water. And just getting through those essentials, I think every day was key, especially if you're alone. And I think it is kind of helpful sometimes when you do have your kids around because they force you to do those things automatically. You don't have a choice to just lay in bed all day. It's not an option for you. You have to take care of them. But when they weren't around, sometimes I felt like just laying in bed all day. And I told myself, no, you can't do that. And if I needed somebody, then I would text my mom, text a friend. Sometimes I would try to make myself like go on a walk just around my neighborhood and just do like one lap to see that life is still going on. People are still doing their own things. You will be okay. It's just going to be hard for a while. You just have to tell yourself that it will eventually be okay, but it's going to be hard.
I love that quote from Untamed. And the other one I often think about when things are hard is that the only way past is through. Like you
Mhm.
can't bypass it. You want to bypass it. You want to be like, it's just fine. Everything's going to be fine. But you can't. You have to like live in the crappy moments and navigate past them.
Yes, couldn't agree more.
Well, God, like I feel like we could spend hours just talking about just the end of relationships. I mean, you are at a very different place now than I think you were articulating to us that you were there then. Can you tell us a little bit about re-entering the dating world and, you know, sort of like what prompted you to say, okay, I'm ready to navigate to the next phase of my life? And does that make sense? Like what made you say, okay, let's go. Let's move on to this next portion of whomever I'm going to be,
Yes, definitely. So after being married for almost 10 years, I felt like I had dedicated such a big part of my life to somebody. I had a hard time imagining myself being with anybody else because I just kept holding on to hope. I don't know how long I kept holding on to that piece of hope. Well, maybe we'll get back together. We're meant to be. It's going to happen. Maybe we just need to go through this breakup and, maybe the divorce papers have to be drawn up so that way we can come back together again. And eventually I found myself not being in love with that person anymore
Mm.
and just seeing how much they had changed from the person that I had seen during our marriage. So I realized
Did you
I
wake up one day and you just say, you know what? All that love, I'm holding on to an old sense of self and not the current person that they are, the current person that I am. Did you was it like a revelation or was it a slow realization?
Oh, it was a slow realization. I think my friends had to almost like put all the things out there for me. Like, would you really get back together? Is that really something you would do? Do you really see it working out if, things would happen? And when I was finally able to push away all the sadness, I'm thinking to myself, no, probably not. Because, with infidelity and anything like that involved, how are you going to trust
Mm.
someone again? So I told myself, you probably need to let go of this hope that you're holding on to and you need to move on. And my friends and I, we used to get together for these wine nights they started having for me, even though I was not a big wine drinker. But we would get together and they would encourage me to start dating. And I would just say, I'm not going to find anybody, like there are just not a lot of gay women where I live. Like my hope is very little of me finding somebody else, it's just not going to happen. And they're like, well, I really think you should put yourself out there. Like, if anything, it's going to keep you busy because you have all this time now of where the kids aren't with you. You spend all your spare time just being sad and thinking about your kids, which you can still think about your kids and have a dating life as well. I pushed myself to do, I got on the dating apps, started scrolling. And the funny thing is, I used to just be Used to be so nervous. I don't know, because it just felt weird to me. I mean, especially after being married for so long, like a part of me, it almost felt like infidelity, even though I knew my marriage was over. But had to tell myself again, no, your marriage is over. It's time you can do this. You'll be okay. And I would say that each girl I did date for longer than just one date actually helped me with my growth. And some of the girls that I dated, I'm actually still really good friends with to this day. So it's actually pretty cool. And we were just able to connect with other things like, traveling or going hiking, about things that we're passionate about. And they actually helped me discover new hobbies that I like. So I would say that going in the dating world was scary, but once I entered it, I wasn't regretting it. I was actually grateful that my friends had pushed me into it, even though I didn't feel ready.
It's so interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about this in these terms before. So I'm going to spitball something and I'm curious if you'll react with me. I wonder if we can start thinking about dating as a form of self-care. You've talked about it as personal growth, but as I'm reflecting on what you're talking about in my own dating experience, with each person, it sort of felt like I either discovered a piece of myself or I healed a piece of myself. And I kind of got like more clear on what I ultimately wanted. Does that resonate a little bit?
Yes, definitely. So I do agree with you that dating is a form of self care, because you're having somebody else, look at the person you are and try to connect with you. And if you're having, problems connecting, then that's something that maybe you should look at for you before you go back to the dating scene.
Totally. And I also feel like with you, totally, like there's almost like the people that you choose to spend time with, dating or friends or other, kind of hold a mirror up to you and say, okay, here's who I am, here's who you are, here's who you are with me. And you get to say, I didn't know that about myself, or I didn't realize that I wasn't quite the person I thought I was in this moment with you. This is really interesting. We've talked about divorce and dating a little bit on the podcast in the past, but it's like such a complicated and ouchy experience for many people. Do you think having been divorced or having kids changed your dating style in any way? Do you think it changed the way in which you were putting yourself out there?
Yes, I think that going through all that, I think it made me more laid back for sure. I don't think I have so much of like, what do people say, like an agenda checklist that people go through when they're trying to find their significant other. Like this person has to hit all this criteria. I think after going through all that, I didn't have as long of a list as I did at the beginning. And even going into the dating scene, I didn't have any goals in mind. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything except maybe something that was going to keep me busy. And like you said, it's a form of self care. It's getting yourself out there. You're not sitting in the house moping around to yourself. And I think it was also a good realization for me to take a better look at myself, because sometimes when you do go through a divorce and somebody leaves you, you have this feeling of, I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't have a good enough job. There's something wrong with me to where this person doesn't want me anymore. So who else is going to want me? And I think when I went into the dating scene, I still had that state of mind, even though I had been alone for a while. And when I jumped into the dating scene, I was able to see myself better. Like, wow, you need to work on what you're worth. You are worth enough. You are enough for somebody else. And if you need more time to take a look at that, then, if it means being alone or talking to somebody, that's something that you should work on.
Oh my God. Yes, I resonate with that so much. That sense of like when a relationship ends, our self-worth is so tied to it that we feel like so undesirable, so unworthy, so unwanted. You're absolutely right. And then if somebody actually likes you, you're like, wow, okay, maybe there's more to me than I am giving myself credit for in this moment. Amazing. When you were dating, did you continue to have that dream of a committed relationship and a big family in the back of your head? Or had you kind of like put that aside and just, as you said, just do it for the self-care for the moment of putting yourself out there, not moping around?
Even when I was dating, I told myself that this was temporary, that in the long run, I do want a committed relationship with a family, because I don't want to spend all my days that I'm not with my kids just dating. It's not something that I had in mind from a young child. Like, I've always wanted to be in a big family, doing all the family things. And so just dating somebody when my kids weren't with me, that was not something I wanted to do permanently. But it was kind of like when I was going through so much heartache with the divorce, it's like, I know this is temporary. You will get through it. You've seen plenty of other people get through it. My own mom got through it, and it was actually kind of you also form new connections with people through it too, like things that they wouldn't necessarily share with you until you go through it yourself. So I told myself, you will get through it. You will probably find somebody, even though you think you're not going to. But it's kind of like when they say, don't be looking so hard. And sometimes
Yeah.
it'll just happen. Or what do they say? You find somebody when you're not looking. I kind of told myself, maybe that'll happen for you.
And did it?
It did. Yeah, it did happen. And it's like somebody I would never imagine myself being with. Like when I talk about the checklist, and how you think about sometimes people think like, well, if you're married to some person and it doesn't work out, you're probably going to look for a similar person, but this person is nothing like my first partner at all. I mean, she's completely different. So, and I didn't expect to be in a relationship with her, but there was something inside me that told myself it felt like a committed relationship with her would be the best situation besides being in the dating scene. And it was a little scary, definitely, especially telling myself, like, okay, you're going to be in a relationship with this person and you don't really know where it's going to go. But even after like talking to my other divorced friends, there was one who actually said something that still resonates with me to this day. And it's like, I really like her, but if she leaves me, I'm going to be okay. And when at first she told me that, I thought, oh my gosh, like you must be so hurt, to like have that state of mind. Like that's what you think when you're with somebody in a relationship. And it kind of scared me. But after I committed in a relationship, I realized that I was thinking the same thing too. Like, I really like this person, but if they decide to leave me, like, I'm going to be okay. I might be sad, but I'm not going to fall apart to the ground again. You've already been there.
Yeah, you can choose to read that as I'm not that connected to this person, or this person is not enough to hold my whole heart. Or you can read it as I'm a badass who's demonstrated I'm resilient and I can get through hard things. And I know that should another hard thing happen, I've got this.
Yes, that's what I think of it as, the second one for sure. Because I know some people might view it as, gosh, you sound a little heartless. Like you don't want to put your heart into somebody else. But it's like, no, my heart is definitely in it. But I also am aware of all the other what ifs that could happen. And if they do happen, like I'm going to be okay.
Totally. Totally. Amazing. So what was it that made you fall for this new partner?
She was currently an EMT, but she was also had an electrician background, which I thought was really awesome because there's not too many women who have that kind of experience. And then she was also in school still studying to be a respiratory therapist. So I think for me, I'm also drawn to somebody who I know has stability and is going somewhere, especially knowing that if in the long run, I want to commit a relationship with somebody and raising a family, that person can't be somebody who doesn't have goals in life and doesn't know what they're going to do. They have to have a career. And I think just hearing that, I was intrigued. And it just seemed like one day led to another. She was kind of going through her own transformation as well as I was. So I think we also connected over that and just took things super slow and kind of leaned on each other with how we were growing. I think she's more independent, and I was kind of the person who probably cried definitely more on her just because I knew I was going through a hard time. And I think even on the first date, when I told her everything I was going through, and to sum it up, it was like, I'm going through a divorce. I have 2 children. I also want to get pregnant by myself. And throwing that out there and it didn't scare her away meant a lot to me.
Oh my gosh. So I actually really want to talk about these 2 conversations you had early in your relationship. One of them sounds very similar. Actually, it sounds a little similar to some conversations that I've had. So I'm curious about how you talk about with a partner, I'm ready to get pregnant on my own. And how did you bring it up? How did she react? I mean, that is an intense and important conversation to have with somebody.
Yeah, it is. And I don't actually really know exactly what she was thinking, but she was definitely still drawn to me. So when I told her that I really wanted more kids and that was my plan, she just said like, "Oh," and she was like smiling and she said she did like kids and she herself came from a very big family who's also divorced, so a lot of half siblings on like both sides. So she likes having a big family. So I think that that kind of kept her in. And also, I think that if you find the right person, I think that that changes a lot too, because I know I've heard that before as well. So I think that from her perspective, it was like, well, I really like this person. And she's told me this several times, like, I support the goals and dreams that you have in mind.
Wow. I mean, imagine, you don't have to imagine this. I'm imagining going from a place of not feeling very worthy of love to going to a place where somebody's like, I love you so much. I'll support whatever your hopes and dreams are. That's like really a powerful change.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a powerful change. And I think that it involves a lot of communication between the two of you, especially because there will be a lot of questions that come up, especially for it. And for me, unfortunately, there was just, I mean, a lot of like legal stuff involved. Getting pregnant wasn't exactly like, I'm going to get pregnant on my own. And like, easier said than done, you know?
Right.
So I don't think that either of us were ready for all the things that were going to come up in the future. But the fact that she still stuck around through all of them meant a lot to me, which means it's like, okay, well, if she can stick around through all this like nitty gritty stuff, then having kids brought into this relationship is going to be amazing because getting through all the hard stuff that leads up to it is really important.
I want to talk about that for sure. When you had that first conversation, was there a part of you that said, well, maybe it's something we do together? Like biologically, I'll do it on my own, but emotionally, it'll be something we do together. Or were you really thinking, I'll keep these two parts of my life separate? I will date you and I will have a family on my own.
I think that I told her eventually, like, if we're still together, eventually I saw that she was in it for the long run for sure.
Yeah.
And seeing her help with my other two children, I knew that we could definitely raise a child emotionally together because especially all the different things that I hit along the way, eventually it was like I had to sell my house and just a lot of things kind of fell onto my lap in the path to creating a child, so to say. So all those steps leading up to it have told me that we are definitely both emotionally ready to raise a child and that, the twins that I'm carrying will see us both as parents. They won't know any different, they have these two women who are together who really, are emotionally connected, ready to raise children together. I think it would also be different if we weren't living together. I think that would be different as well. But especially when you live together, I mean, I think it's bound to happen, right? You are raising these kids together. It would be impossible to be like, okay, these are the kids I'm going to raise, but we still live together. So you stay in the bedroom and I'm going to go over here with these children. That just doesn't make any sense.
Totally. So it seems almost like your initial conversation of I'm going to go do this on my own is now we're having two kids together. We're pregnant with twins together.
Mhm.
And it just so happens that the biology is my biology with a sperm donor.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, the way I ended up pregnant too, it's also, I was very limited in how I could get pregnant too, but I am also very grateful that the children I'm carrying will have a connection to my other children besides that, they're going to be in their lives, obviously, but having that genetic connection will be pretty special for them to have. Just because, especially with the divorce and them going back and forth, I think that's one thing that is kind of neat. It's not something they're going to actually know about until they're way older, but I think it's neat just knowing that in the back of my mind.
If you could walk us through, to the extent that you feel comfortable or are able to disclose, the moment from where you had this conversation with this wonderful person who wants to support your hopes and dreams about going and getting pregnant, to the ups and downs that brought you to where you are now, pregnant with twins. Can you talk a little bit about what you did and what the process was?
Yeah. So when I had talked to my girlfriend Heather about wanting to be pregnant, she didn't, even though she's gay, right? Sometimes we automatically assume, like, oh, well, anyone who's gay knows all the different paths to getting pregnant and creating a family, but that's a major, major assumption. So she had no idea. I talked to her about how my first two children were created through reciprocal IVF, how I had these embryos frozen, but I couldn't touch them, but how I'm also faced with infertility struggles. So it was kind of amongst the legal battle system of trying to get those embryos. I did try to get pregnant on my own, and she was very supportive. We did the whole home insemination thing where
Mhm.
I tried shipping out these sperm bottles, which are ginormous tanks. Oh my gosh, so overwhelming when they come in the mail.
I've done that too. It was crazy. They're like waist high tanks of nitrogen for what ultimately is what, an inch and a half vial of sperm.
Yes. I mean, it was pretty exciting too. I mean, I could tell that myself as well as Heather was excited about it. Just going through the process, like, this is so cool. We're going to make like this child. And I ended up trying it 3 times. And, you sign up for all the free apps of like tracking your ovulation, just doing everything you can. And that 2 week wait, like, oh my gosh, my period's late. Like, this could be it. This could be the moment. And, watching, like, eating everything healthy, Googling every single thing, just trying to prepare your body to make like the nice home environment that a little baby would just want to nestle itself in. So, and, it did work. I was so happy. I remember I took a pregnancy test and it was one of the ones that had like the 2 lines. And I remember seeing that second line, appear and just getting so overwhelmingly excited about how, like, okay, well, I'll do it again in a few days and I'll watch it even get darker, because it was definitely there. I showed it to Heather too. And she's like, oh my gosh, like, this is so great. And then being faced, I don't remember how, I don't know if it was like a week later or 2 weeks later, with just like an overwhelming feeling and not your usual menstrual cycle, and knowing that something bad had happened, going to your gynecologist after and just having them tell you, it was a miscarriage, you're going to be okay. But also feeling that overwhelming feeling of like, oh my gosh, like, I can't create a child on my own, and having all this hope that I was going to be able to make one by myself. It kind of felt amazing. Like, oh my gosh, this child was made during such a hard time in my life, but I'm going to be so happy that, I can explain how they were created. So kind of feeling that downfall, and, Heather was so encouraging, like, why don't you just try again? Like, we'll just keep pouring our money into all this sperm and trying and trying. But I told her, like, I can't do it again. Like, I'm not emotionally prepared to do it again. And at the time, it didn't seem like there was any hope of getting my embryos back. So that's when I went back to the clinic and I told myself, like, okay, I'm going to do another round of IVF by myself. Like, it's just meant to be. You just need a little bit of help. And after going through that third egg retrieval, because I'd already been through 2 egg retrievals in my life to have my 2 daughters. So now I was on my third egg retrieval. Everything looked good up until the actual day that they were retrieved, where they told me a lot of the follicles they retrieved were just empty. So, when they do the ultrasound and they see, oh, you have 11 follicles, like, oh my gosh, that's great. I know not all of them are going to fertilize, but I'm thinking, like 8, 7, 6, that's great. But then they told me that only 2 came out and I was devastated. I cried the whole way home until after I just passed out because you're so overwhelmed with all the medications and stuff that you're on. And when I woke up later that day, And there was a call from the IVF clinic, and I told myself, oh gosh, this isn't good. Like, I've already been through the sad phone calls before from an IVF clinic. And they had told me that they weren't fertilizing well. They were trying ICSI, which is where they inject the sperm into the egg because the sperm's swimming around the egg. It wasn't going in by itself. So I held on to hope for the one that was remaining, but they told me that that one didn't look to be growing great. So when I did get the phone call the following day, I remember I was at work and I didn't even answer the phone call because I knew it was bad news. So I remember I didn't even listen to the voicemail. I looked at like the transcript of the voicemail when I was on my lunch break because I told myself, okay, you have 40 minutes to cry until your students come back. So you need to pull it together. And that's what I did. And then, I talked to my nurse like a few days later. I had been emailing her, but she has been with me since my two daughters were born. So she has seen me go through everything. We're pretty close. And she had told me, I don't know why that didn't work. If you want to try again, we're willing to just push your ovaries to the max. She's like, we talked about you in case study as we do with everybody. And we don't have any explanation. Like, you are 33 now. And when I had my eggs retrieved for my successful retrieval, I was, I believe, like 26, 25. So she said, maybe it's age that's a factor. So I decided to go through it again. I also had been going through so many so many emotional things from a divorce. Like, I had to go on antidepressants because I was so sad. And then the antidepressants made this horrible acne come on my skin. So I had to go through another round of Accutane. I mean, just so many medications that I had been pumping into my body and trying to eat healthy to like cleanse my body again. And then injecting myself with another round of a ton of hormones. So I went through it again. But at the time that I was going through this fourth round of IVF, everything that had been going on in the court system had actually come around in my favor. And I was given a settlement to get my embryos back, which I had accepted. And my body had already been ready to receive embryos. So it actually just worked out perfectly that after that fourth retrieval that I was able to transfer my original embryos back to me. So
What good
I,
timing.
yeah, so it was really good timing. So that's when I told myself, there are some good things that come to those who wait. You had been through miscarriage, hormone injections, all this stuff, but now you're going to be able to transfer these too. And I told myself, if the timing's right, then I think both of these are going to take, because you want two babies so badly. And I know how bad you want them that I prayed so much that they would both take. And I was thrilled to hear after my first blood test, my beta number was so high because it indicated that there's probably twins, but you need to wait till the ultrasound to confirm. So I was very, very happy.
It's hard to talk about the infertility space because if you say timing is everything or you just wait until it works out, that's really not true for everyone. But sometimes, every once in a while, the magic happens and timing works out. And it sounds like that's what came together for you.
Yes, and I know unfortunately it doesn't happen for everybody, and it's so hard to hear other people's stories sometimes where there hasn't been any success. Or I'm a part of several different social groups, like platforms where women are just talking about their experience, and there'll be some that just write, I'm done with my journey. I'm looking to donate, my extra vials of sperm. And it hurts just hearing how sad I can tell they are, even though it's just words written on a computer screen. You can't hear their voice, but I can tell that in order to say, like, I'm officially done, I can't imagine all the emotion that's being poured into that.
Oh my goodness. I totally agree with you on that. Can you help me understand? We intentionally didn't spend too much time on your first journey because it was wrapped up in a prior relationship. But your first journey was both reciprocal IVF and several egg retrievals. Ultimately, the babies that you're currently carrying, were they from the egg retrievals you did?
They're from the first round. So it's kind of crazy to think about because if you think about when they were all retrieved, they're kind of all the same age. But since they've been frozen and then they're put in at different times, they're all different ages. So they could all be the same age.
So fun. For anyone listening, we're being intentionally delicate about anything legal because anything that was in a court system should not be disclosed in a podcast. But is there anything you can tell us about the legal process that might aid somebody who's considering going through a legal journey to navigate what happens to embryos post-divorce?
Yeah, so it's definitely a gray area. It also depends on where you live. But I would say that the most proper way before you go through any reciprocal IVF or egg retrieval is to have a lawyer draw up an actual legal document outlining what you would like to have done. Because clinics will give you a document that you need to sign, at least here in California, they will, and you and your partner will sign it. But that is not a legal document officially. So, regardless of what happens, if you and your partner are no longer together and you guys do not have the same views on what to do with the embryos, it will still need to go to court. And ultimately, a judge will decide what happens with the embryos. So, just I would just seek legal advice, which I think is something that we have quite a few people talking about, even on social media, when it comes to children being born. If you want to make sure you are officially a legal parent for that child, that you would seek legal advice for sure, and not just have the birth certificate be the final call.
Yeah, so it's almost like a prenup, if I'm hearing you correctly, around how to navigate an embryo that is created with two different people. And that can be gay, straight, otherwise. And then secondly, if you are in a same-sex couple, there's some post-delivery adoption legal work that we have to have, which Jenna Jaffe in a previous season has talked about.
Right, I agree. And I think with a constantly changing world, I think that it's always a good idea just to seek legal advice if you're ever in question about what is going on. I don't think it ever would hurt you to look into it. I just think sometimes you might feel threatened even saying the word lawyer when you're in a committed relationship with somebody because you're like, well, why do you want to bring a lawyer involved in this? But I think it's better to be safe and just know exactly all the different things that could happen just to make your mind feel at ease because I honestly didn't foresee anything happening like this, but I feel so much more educated after going through it all. And I do hope that in the future it's kind of better outlined for anybody who has embryos, whether you be gay or straight. I think eventually our legal system will get there so we don't have so many questions. But right now it's just kind of, I think it just depends on where you live and all these other factors.
Yeah, and I'm not a lawyer, but I would venture to guess that as our political system changes, as certain states have different views on what to do with embryos, and it's rapidly changing right now, having some legal documents that factor that in might be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's just so many, yeah, like you said, there's just so many things changing.
Is there any advice you'd give to somebody going through a legal battle on how to prepare emotionally or, what to do to manage through that?
Yeah, I think anybody who's going through that, speaking of somebody who still is going through that, going on year 3 of this, it does get easier. I'm not saying that battle itself is easier, but I think mentally and emotionally it gets easier for you and you kind of know exactly what's worth fighting for and what is worth just letting it go, as Elsa would say. Just let it go. There's some things that they're just not worth it. Just really put those top things in mind of what you really want to go for. Time does help a lot of things, unfortunately. And sometimes we want to push through time, but you don't ever want to waste your time. There's so much growth that happens in between there and so many good things that come out of it. So just give yourself time and prioritize those things that you're really, really passionate about.
And was there anything that you did to influence the outcome that enabled you to get custody of your embryos? For instance, did you choose to let go of something that was less important to you? Or was there something about the way in which you approached the situation that might have led to that outcome?
Although I don't know exactly how things fell the way they did, besides that, I never gave up. I can tell you that much. I never stopped fighting. And at one point, it did kind of cross my mind, like, okay, well, you can just create more embryos. Like, not a big deal. You got this. But after going through that and realizing that my body just wasn't able to do that, and realizing that I had tried at home insemination, I had tried IVF, like, this is literally probably your only hope at having more children, unless you go through adoption or some other route. I think trying everything I could and not stopping at all, I think helped lead me to where I am today. Because there was no question in the back of my mind that this was my only hope. And if I had not tried at home insemination and if I had not gone through IVF again, then those things would have been in the back of my mind, like, well, you could have just gone and done that. It would have been a lot easier. But I know the answers to those questions now.
Well, you have been through one hell of a journey from trying all the different medical methods to have babies and exiting one relationship, recovering from that, meeting this incredible person who is now in your life, Heather, and now being pregnant with twins. So we will ultimately have 4 kiddos. We started by talking about dreams and having this vision around family. Given all that you've been through, what does family mean to you now?
I think I still have the same saying in mind where I say that love does make a family, especially whoever loves your kids like crazy and you see that connection between them, especially seeing how my girlfriend connects with my 2 daughters, just seeing the love that's there. But I do still stand by that love does make a family, and it really doesn't matter about the genetics or who's brought in, how your children are brought into your family, but all the other factors, that you are thinking about, they just kind of disappear when you're together and you just see all the love that's in there.
Oh, beautiful. Where can we find you, Christina, if we're looking to connect with you on social media?
Primarily Instagram for sure. That is where I am. So Baby Bailey Mama Drama. Such a handful of a name, but that is where I am.
It's memorable. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I so love having this conversation, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with our audience and staying in touch with you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.